Hello. So my name is Brian. I will adjust this because I'm self-conscious about how loud I can be. My name is Brian. I'm from New York City, born and raised in the Bronx. And today I'm going to talk to you about a career change that I made starting 2 years ago. I used to be a hairstylist actually for 10 years. And so I'll start at the beginning. I actually started programming at the age of 13. Um, I got into ActionScript. I was fascinated by Flash. If any of you remember, Flash is not really a technology that's used much anymore. And it was so similar to JavaScript that I told everybody that I've been programming in JavaScript since I was the age of 13. And fast forward, I went to college. I had spent so much time behind the computer that when I got to college, I wanted to pick a career path where I wouldn't be at a computer the rest of my life, and I ended up going for finance. And little did I know that I would have ended up at a computer the rest of my life anyway. And I come from a single-parent household. I was raised by a single mom, so we didn't have much money. So while I was in school, I needed to find a way to make money. So I started walking around the neighborhood on campus, and I saw a barbershop had just opened up nearby. And I walked in, and I asked the owner if he would give me a job. And he asked me if I knew how to do hair. And in my mind, it was similar enough to drawing, which I knew. So I said to him that I knew enough. And he asked me to come in on Monday. That was on a Thursday. He asked me to come in on Monday with someone and my equipment and to do a haircut to demonstrate my skills. And that Thursday, I went out. I asked my mom for 300 bucks. It was hard to give it to me, but she gave it to me anyway. And I bought a bunch of equipment. And that weekend, I spent it practicing on cousins and my brother and friends and just jacking up a bunch of haircuts. And on Monday, I had gone with a friend of mine from school. He had agreed to let me butcher his hair. And I did a good enough job on a fairly regular haircut where the owner of the shop decided to give me a job, and he agreed to polish my skills. And what ended up happening was, so 3 months of me doing that, I had messed up so many haircuts. I had cut so many clients doing hot towel shaves. I'd cut myself with the scissors, that I remember 3 months down the line waking up one morning and thinking to myself, you know what, I'm going to pick up all of my equipment. I'm quitting today. This is not for me. And that same day I went in, and it was the first time that I did a haircut that I was proud of. And that kept me in for that day. And I just kept going back every single day, and every day I kept doing stuff that I was proud of. And I said, all right, like, this is getting better. And 6 months had gone by, and I decided that I would leave school because I fell in love with that industry. And I left finance. I was going to Iona College. I left Iona College, and I started a career which I tell people was a very fulfilling career to me. I spent 10 years doing hair, and it was fulfilling because for those of you that go to someone and get your hair done, or ladies where you go and get your nails done, you know that you build a very tight relationship with the person that does your hair. And it was very fulfilling for me because I had built some really strong friendships, some really strong bonds. I met a lot of people I actually met people that connected me to the Latin music industry, and I started doing hair in the Latin music, in the Latin entertainment industry. And just to kind of demonstrate my skill set, I decided to throw this into the presentation, just kind of a visual of the type of work that I was doing. And you can see I went from being a not-so-good hairstylist to someone that's decent. So about 2 years ago, so I actually want to preface this part of the talk with this. Several years ago, about 3.5 years ago, I met a girl, and I got into a pretty serious relationship, and I knew that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. The problem was, as a hairstylist or as a barber or anyone that's in a service industry, it's difficult to have a family life because you start very early in the morning to take care of your customers that are early birds. You have to stay there all day to take care of the people that walk in. But then you also have to stay very late at night to take care of the people that get out late from work. And you also work during the weekends. So it was very hard for me to have a personal life or for me to even think about me having the possibility of having a family life. So my brother, he works at Facebook now. At the time, he was working at a company named Fixu. They were a company out in Boston. They did marketing for mobile apps. And he remembered that I had been programming since I was 13. And one thing that I didn't mention, throughout the 10 years of me doing hair, I also did consulting work where I built client-facing websites, mostly for the purposes of branding and marketing for local businesses. Because again, I was a hobbyist. I really enjoyed programming and designing. So I always did it to maintain my skills. So he said to me, well, you have this skill set. It'd be really easy for you to transition and change careers and get into the tech scene. And he recommended that I visit a site called Treehouse. And on Treehouse, if any of you are familiar with it, it's an online tech school where I started learning about front-end development. I started learning about full-stack JavaScript development, and I started filling in the gaps in my skill set of things that I didn't know how to do that I would have to know how to do in order to be marketable as a front-end engineer or as a software engineer. And a year ago, I start looking for jobs. I feel like I'm ready, and I start going on interviews. And I went on a handful of interviews, and I got great feedback from each interview I went on. However, I wouldn't get the job. So I'm questioning myself, why am I getting such positive feedback, but I'm not getting the job? And it was really two reasons. One of the reasons was I didn't have any experience, which I thought, well, how does anyone get started in any industry? Everyone gets started with no experience. But the main thing was, on Treehouse, I had learned all of the core skills. I learned HTML, CSS, JavaScript. But I didn't learn any technologies, any frameworks or libraries that I could use to build scalable apps in a real-world setting. So my brother had hinted me off to a technology called React and React Native. And I started looking into it, and a year ago in September. In December, I had found a meetup called React Native NYC, which I attended, which was a very positive experience for me because one thing I wasn't doing was I wasn't attending meetups either. And by going to that meetup, I was very encouraged by what I was seeing people building with the React Native technology. And I was also very encouraged by how positive the tech community here in New York is, and how they were pushing me to just grow myself, and they were giving me contacts for people that I could reach out to if I had any questions. And that was in December. At the end of December, I started developing an app. I started playing around with React Native, just toying around. And I started developing an app called Squat Right. Now, just to kind of give you some history, years ago, I started getting into powerlifting. And I used to weigh 156 pounds. I weigh 185 pounds now, thanks to powerlifting. And one of the things that I struggled with the most when I started powerlifting was I didn't know how deep I should go or if I was going deep enough on my squat. And if any of you do squats or work out, you should know that it's very important to reach the right depth for the safety of your knees and your lower back. And so I had this idea for this app called Squat Right. The idea was I could build an app that would monitor, using the accelerometer on a phone, that would monitor how deep you would go, and it would alert you when you reach the right depth. And so I said, well, I know JavaScript, and I know CSS, so I could definitely use React Native to build this. Let's see how viable the technology really is. And if it is, and if it works, then I feel that I'll become much more marketable to get a job. So I spent 2 months developing this app, and I'm just going to show you a quick video a screen capture that I did of it. This is what it looks like. So you hit start. You can select the depth that you want to reach using the slider, and then you also have settings for how it alerts you. And when you hit activate, the idea is you put it in your pocket, and I'll actually demo this for you guys. I hope it's loud enough. Is this a wireless mic? Okay, great. No. All right, so this is the app, and this is with the button activated, with the function running, and this is the way it works. You just put it in your pocket. And if you don't squat down to the right depth, can everyone over there see me as well? And all of you guys can see me? If you don't squat down to the right depth, nothing happens. However, if you squat down to the depth where your legs are parallel to the floor or your hip bone just passes the height of your knees, you'll get an alert. And it took me 2 months to build that. And it was an amazing experience because, so one of the challenges that I was having with the app is I got it to work, but a lot of my users were getting false positives because as they were trying to put the phone in their pocket, the alert was going off because the accelerometer was reading for angles. One of the things React Native didn't have and still doesn't have is access to the proximity sensor API for the mobile device. And no one had written a package, a library for it. I couldn't find anything on NPM that I could use for that. So what I did was this. I was determined to finish this app because I had gotten so far. So I went on Treehouse and I invested 30 hours 1 week to learning Swift so that I could take 30 minutes to write the methods that would allow me to access the API for the proximity sensor. And that actually, I'll actually show you that code in a little bit. It won't be too technical, but I'll speak through that. Another app that I built was for a company that I interned at this past summer named Grovo. So when I deployed my Squat Right app, it had gotten some attention from my network on LinkedIn. I had published it to LinkedIn. And someone contacted me on LinkedIn to come in and interview for a front-end position at a company named Grovo. I never asked them if it was senior, junior, mid-level. I just went in for the interview, and it was for a senior position. And they didn't give me the job because it was for a senior position, and I didn't have any experience yet, and I wasn't going to take a senior position. But they liked me. So they said, look, we don't have an intern position available, but we're willing to take you on as an intern so that you could get some experience, and also it would allow us to test the technical feasibility of React Native. This way, when Native does become a thing for the company, they know whether to go React Native or whether to go native. And we ended up building up a prototype. It was a platform-agnostic prototype. It runs both on Android and iOS with one code base. The Android and iOS app share up to 75% of the code base. And the really cool thing was their web application is built in React and Redux. And we were able to share, we were able to determine that up to 20% of the business logic that was written in Redux is also shareable with the mobile app. And here's a UI demo of the mobile app. And I have permission to show this. So. Oh. Maybe because I'm running QuickTime, I'm not sure if it's not, if it won't show. Oh, there it goes. So it's a login, a scrollable view. You have a date picker at the bottom for you to pick the day that you want to see. And then these are lessons. The company, they create content for people in the L&D space that want to create and deploy training material to their employees. So I was able to create this for the company in a little under 2 months. And yeah. So, okay, where am I now? Okay, let me see. Oh, let's talk about code. So I'm going to talk about some of the code that I wrote, and okay, so after my experience at the internship, I learned so much, and one of the analogies that I like to use, or the way that I like to explain it, is doing the internship increased the resolution to a blurry image that I had of the rest of the stack. I was only experienced in building things that looked pretty, but I didn't know how to wire anything up to a backend to make it function. So it was a great experience. So now when I look at this code for my app, I'm actually embarrassed of the way the code looks. I could do a much better job now. But anyway, I wanted to talk about my experience in building out the functionality in Swift to get access to the proximity sensor API. Because one of the things that people question with React Native is, yeah, you could build native apps, but do you have access to everything native? And the answer to the question is no, not right away. But yes, if you know some native code, then you could just extend the framework to give you access to the rest of the APIs. And here is, I called it RN proximity. This is the view in my app that shows you the start button to start the functionality for the monitoring. And I'm importing right off of React Native. I'm accessing their native modules, and from there I'm accessing what I named RN proximity, which is React Native proximity. And I'm making use of this in a function that I wrote called handle activation press, which I call enable proximity monitoring to turn on the monitoring for the proximity sensor. And it also turns on device motion updates, which is a function that tracks the pitch on the x-axis for the accelerometer. That's the function that allows me to track what angle the phone is in. I didn't write this function. This is actually a package that I pulled off of NPM. And then in here, I'm calling get proximity state, where I'm checking if the state of the proximity sensor is covered or uncovered. And just keep note of the naming that I have for these functions, and now we'll look at Swift. So in Swift, I wrote these functions: enable proximity monitoring, disable proximity monitoring, and get proximity state. This is in Swift, and the React Native documentation, they do a very good job at walking you through how to export methods from native code, and also how to export UI views from native code and bridge it into JavaScript so that you can access it in React Native. So with this file, I just copied and pasted what I saw in the documentation, and then I just renamed the exports to the functions that I wrote in Swift. And that's how I'm able to access these functions in JavaScript. And that's as technical as this talk is going to get. So, and I think that's about it. Thank you. Thank you. So, any more questions? And just on a side note, I am on the market for a job. So, so.